Hey guys, Andrew Henderson, Nomad Capitalist, here hanging out at the beach in Bali. I wanted to do a little video on something I know a lot of folks are Googling about, talking about, looking for in the world of offshore banking. And it's something that I think has gone the way of the dodo bird. Now, right in front of me, where I'm standing here, is a big, beautiful beach. And while Indonesia never started its own banking sector, it's a big country. Plenty of smaller countries with beaches, tiny little islands all around the world have set up their own banking sectors, and we love them for that. They took advantage of an opportunity in the market, created easy-to-use banks, and lots of banks all around the world, in places like the Cook Islands, places like all the Caribbean islands, even the non-islands like Belize got into the game. Small countries that figured, hey, we can hold people's money, and that'll be one of the big things that we do. Cayman Islands is famous for that. But one of the things along the way that these banks used is their kind of secret sauce that got people in the door that might not have otherwise come, was the idea of what's called a remote bank account opening. And a remote bank account opening is basically what it sounds like. It's where you don't have to be there to open a bank account. Typically when you go and open an account in the US, in Canada, Australia, wherever, you go in, you show your driver's license, you show some kind of ID or where you live, stuff like that. And that's the case with banks all around the world. Obviously, offshore banks that are outside of your country all have their different protocols, which is why there's often a lot of confusion when it comes to figuring out which offshore bank is best. But I'll tell you what's changed in the last couple of years. One of the big things that's changed is the Panama Papers. One of the big things that's also changed is the government's increasing focus on wiping out terrorism and drugs and all that different stuff. And yes, they use those things as excuses. But whether you like it or not, a lot of these banks in smaller countries have been under the radar. And some of them have really gotten whacked. Others of them have just had their competitive advantage taken away. And in an era where your bank really needs to know who you are to avoid not only the problems of opening the account, but the problems of keeping the account open, the idea of sending some papers through FedEx is no longer appealing. Now, I said as recently as, I don't know, 2.5 years ago, that hey, remote bank account opening, toss $500 in an account, build a tunnel, it's pretty easy. And it still somewhat is. There are still banks where you can get an account open. The challenge really that I see going forward, and the challenge that some folks who have come to me have already been having, is keeping the account open, moving the money out, accessing the money, getting people to deposit money in. So these banks that offer remote account opening, not only I think it's becoming more and more difficult to do a remote account opening to the point where it's just worth it to fly there, and you'll probably save the money in fees and everything else very quickly. But keeping the account open is becoming the big challenge now with offshore banking. Even if you can get an account, how do you keep the account? Like that old Seinfeld joke about rental cars. You want to keep the account. You want to be able to receive money, send money. If you just have an account with a bunch of money sitting there and it's locked and you can't do anything with it, that doesn't really serve you. And that happened to some folks in Belize recently. It happened to some folks in other places. More and more countries are especially shutting down to US citizens. But quite frankly, even if you're not a US citizen, my advice more and more is get on a plane. If it matters to you, if it's important to you to have some money in another country, go to the best bank. Don't necessarily find the best bank with the competitive advantage of sitting at home on your couch. That worked a couple years ago, still works in some situations. I'm sure there'll be folks who will say, you know, they can do it, just pay them $1,200. Maybe someone even in the comments section of this video will have some magic solution that suggests that I'm wrong. But I can tell you from a lot of personal experience and a lot of bank account openings that not only are the banks that you open in person a lot better, a lot higher quality, but they also get to understand you, and you eliminate a lot of the challenges of ongoing operations. So remote bank account opening, I think from a practical perspective, is largely coming to an end. There are some cases where if you have an attorney in a particular country, you can do a power of attorney. I don't have experience with that in places like Singapore. I have experience with it in more mid-range jurisdictions. But you know, things like power of attorney are great. Of course, it means you have to have an attorney in that country, so it might just be easier to fly there and do it than find an attorney. But there are also a few other banks that are really rock-solid banks that have special remote opening procedures for example, only US citizens. There are a couple banks in Europe that allow that. There are a couple banks in Asia that allow that. Those banks are better, and by the way, they generally require at least $100,000, sometimes into the millions of dollars to do it, so this is not the $500 account. In general, remote bank account opening, not a great procedure. I'm not saying that there aren't banks that are out there. I know a couple that I do recommend that work well with remote account opening, but the average tiny little island, put $50 in the account, pay $20 a month in fees and just kind of have some fun, do it all, it's very easy, is really, in my opinion, going away. So you want to be careful, you want to put the effort in. As I always say, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing right.